recording.
Hello, everyone. This is Michelle Anton, Brand Ambassador for Clarity. I am so glad that you're on the call today. This webinar is going to be hosted by our very favorite Art Meakin, Brand Promoter for Clarity. And if you haven't had the pleasure of meeting Art and you don't know about him, let me just tell you a couple of things real quick before I turn it over to him. Art Meakin's a marketing trailblazer in the 90s. He started one of the first and fastest growing MLM companies on the internet, which shows you that he was on the cutting edge way back when. And he's developed several large direct selling organizations, reaching the #1 top distributor spot in 4 companies. As I said, he's a host for tonight's Clarity webinar. He's a brand promoter for Clarity, and he brings more than 30 years as a successful network marketing pro with him. So, Art, take it away.
Thank you, Michelle. Appreciate it very much. Folks, we've got a really great webinar for you tonight. We decided to do 2 product webinars in 1 month instead of just one, and we've invited Chris Neville to be back with us. In fact, here's a nice photo of him, and great photo of him at our last event in November 7th, where we introduced the QCHIP. And Chris, I want to make sure we can hear you before I say any more about you. Are you there?
Yeah, Art? Yep.
Yes, okay, great. Well, it's great that you're here with us. Thank you for being with us. And everybody on the webinar, thank you for being with us. And those of you that are watching the webinar on the recording, thank you for taking the time to be with us tonight. Really my honor and privilege to introduce Chris Neville, our Vice President of Product Development. He's an absolute genius. And you'll be able to tell that by listening to him here in just a few seconds. And Chris, one of the reasons that we did this second webinar this month is that we've had a lot of questions about the QCHIP, and I know that you've made some special slides to answer some of those questions and to kind of clarify what the QCHIP is and what it's all about and how it works, and in more layman's terms and things like that. So I'm going to turn it over to you. And you just tell me the slides to go to next, and I'll go to it. Thank you.
Thanks, Art, and thanks, everyone, for joining us. Definitely an exciting arena as far as where we're heading at the moment with Clarity, and the introduction recently of our QCHIP is certainly a starting point. But this evening, if you can just go to the next slide, Art, would be great. Disclaimer, obviously the important thing about a disclaimer is that we're sharing some information with you this evening. It's for general educational purposes only, and the content is not been evaluated by the FDA. You can read through that later on, it's fine. What we want to share a little bit about tonight is an understanding about a phenomenal area of science known as quantum physics. We're not going to bore you with too much detail here for 2 reasons. Number one, I tend to understand things conceptually and want to convey things visually as well, so people get more of an understanding what it means to them in practical layman's terms as well. But we recently introduced a technology called a QCHIP, which we'll be sharing a little bit about tonight. And part of the foundation for the QCHIP is the QCET technology. Now, what we mean by that is that there's a proprietary technology that has the ability to be able to infuse certain subtle energy frequencies, and we're going to explain more about what that all looks like in just a moment, into physical matter and into products. So you'll see that QCET stands for Quantum Signature Enhancement Technology. Okay, next. For many of you, you may have heard of the fabulous Nikola Tesla. Going back to the turn of last century, he said that if you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. And for me, that's super exciting because many people have heard the terms energy, frequency, and vibration, or waves, or otherwise, but there are so many different layers to what that means. And so this evening we want to cover off conceptually what we're referring to, but also to give you a little bit of background into our QCET technology and what that means for our QCHIP, but also what that means for us in 2016 and beyond as we bring new products onto the offering, and also what that's going to look like as far as features and benefits for somebody who's actually using it. So let's take a look at some of the research into this arena. The QCHIP technology is based on a nanotechnology, scalar wave, Schumann resonance. Now, Schumann resonance, just before we go too far, if you look at the image on the left-hand side, you'll actually notice the human being, side profile with the brain, and there's also a curvature of the Earth. Years ago, there was some fabulous research that unraveled the frequency that the Earth naturally emits and produces, and this was known as the Schumann resonance. And the way it's measured is that there's a frequency that is from the surface of the Earth through to the ionosphere, and that cavity naturally produces a resonance. Now, it's exactly the same resonance and the same frequency as the human brain, interestingly enough. So if you think of the skull and then the matter being the brain, grey matter for most of us, you'll actually have the cavity has exactly the same frequency. And that's important for what we're going to discuss a little bit later on as well. So this Schumann resonance is something that's fundamental to human health. And when we're not engaged with that frequency, we start to experience a whole range of subtle but very important long-term disturbances to our sense of well-being. We also have included the Solfeggio frequency scale. Now, you'll notice that the little white chart there with the 5 to 8 in the middle, and there's a whole range of other frequencies as well that are combined within this ancient scale of music. And music that was produced and sung or played in this particular scale had such a profound impact as going back to the healing power of sound. And there's a very specific reason for that, because there's some subtlety I'll show you and what it means to not just the ear, but also the vibrational pattern and what it means to our general sense of well-being. The 5 to 8 hertz is also regarded as the love frequency. So there's going to be a little bit of love on the call tonight. So what we want to do is to just share with you some understanding that when we're in the flow of natural order, the body tends to resonate, it tends to vibrate at elevated levels. And as a byproduct, we tend to experience greater levels of vibrancy and health. The other interesting little image there is actually just a little fern there, but it actually has some frozen water that's there, and it's a geometric pattern that all life produces on a micro and a macro level. So next slide. Oh, sorry, just back up one slide if you could, please, Art. I just jumped ahead one slide too quickly. Next one again. Thank you. So there's a combination of other frequencies there, the orgone frequency, which was really understood by science, but what a lot of ancient societies knew as prana, those who understand Ayurvedic medicine, or from martial arts where they understand chi and ki, which is also through traditional Chinese medicine and Japanese acupuncture as well. And they use this understanding of prana and chi and ki flowing through the body, and it's now being able to be measured by science because they've now got instrumentation that can measure subtle energy fields, and it's these fields that are most relevant to what we're sharing this evening as well. There's also been some additional research through many universities globally, but specifically with the US military and 6 other universities based in America, that were looking at the impact of radar operators and being around the frequencies of radar, and the subsequent with radar, speed detectors, and the onset of testicular cancer for many of the police officers that were using the equipment, and a range of other research that went on specifically for the telecommunications industry and whether or not wireless or Wi-Fi had an impact on the human body. Now, what I'm going to share this evening is that there is some research. It's not commonly known, but it doesn't mean that it's not known. It's been very well documented, but what we need to understand as well is that very much like the tobacco industry, when it was trying to dismiss the idea that smoking did anything bad to the health or had any effect on the health whatsoever. We're in a situation where the wireless and also the telecommunications industry, I believe, in my own personal opinion, in the next 5 years is going to become self-evident in some of the things that we're unleashing. We're exposed to more radiation today, millions of times more than what our grandparents were, and that's a very significant thing, which Dr. George Carlos, who was instrumental with many of these early research clinical studies, found. There's also the Research Institute for Vital Energetics in Germany that produced some stunning results because they're able to measure and monitor some of the subtle energy fluctuations in the body. Signatures we'll cover again in a moment. These are the signatures or the signs of nature. And when we talk about coherence, what we're talking about is order or symmetry or balance. And something that's incoherence, think of that as being disorder, or maybe like static or buffering, that kind of concept. Next. So when we talk about catch the wave, what are we talking about? Certainly to start out, 2015, we had our Catch the Wave campaign, but realistically what it's about is being able to see something before it emerges. And you'll see that a wave that many people are familiar with, there are different interpretations of what a wave is. There you have a famous legend surfer going back to the early pioneers in big wave surfing. In fact, it's actually Robin Hoffman's dad there, being very much a legend in the big wave riding of surf. And with regard to surf, you can see that on the right-hand side down the bottom there is also how surf and the wave action within water produces not only the surf that somebody's able to ride, but just looking at a cross-section, you'll see the rise and the fall, or what they call a crest and a trough. Now, the crest and the trough of a wave is certainly something that's important for surfing, but let's talk about it in other realms as well. When we look at that, it's known as a sine wave, and at the top, you'll see that there's zigzag, the rise and fall of a wave as well. When they talk about amplitude, what they're referring to is how high or the distance between the crest and the trough. And that amplitude is the AM, like amplitude modulation. And then you've got the frequency, the number of cycles per second. The frequency modulation being the FM band is really kind of the two different directions radio went as well. And noise, you'll see as being something that's very distorted and doesn't have any form of order or flow in it. Next, please. So when we're talking about QCHIP, and specifically QCHIP, what we're talking about is a helix wave. And a helix wave is something that's fundamental to all life on a micro and a macro level. And when you talk about an order, so think of the spin of an electron, where you've got a nucleus and then you've got an electron that swirls around the outside. There is movement. There's also movement of, you look at the solar system with the sun in the middle and the movement of the star, the planets around the solar system, around the sun. And then, so you've got this movement of a circular motion, but you also have that our sun is moving through the galaxy as well, and you'll see that there's the galaxy swirl. So that spiral, that swirl, that circular motion, in motion, looks like a helix wave. So what you have, if you were to look at it side on, would be the rise and the fall, but you'd also have the turning and the twisting. And that's really an important element because it's like being in line with a greater force that naturally operates throughout all scales of energy in existence, from micro right the way through to macro. And this is what we refer to as the helix wave. or a DNA wave. Thanks, Art. Next. Some of the early research was conducted when humans were first going into space. And why this became important was that astronauts and cosmonauts at the time with the International Space Station, or the Mir back in the early days, space station, they were being affected by being away from the Schumann resonance. So when they went outside of the ionosphere into space, it wasn't just about being weightless. It was actually the fact that their body was physically away from the resonant field. So it's a bit like a fish out of water, this resonant field of the Schumann resonance. And what happens were the health implications for cosmonauts and astronauts were starting to degenerate and decay. And so they started to have early symptoms of conditions that would be quite catastrophic if it were not measured or monitored. They developed a way to be able to measure and monitor the body field in what they call electrodermal mapping. But simply what it means is they developed a way of being able to measure and monitor the energy flow of chi and ki and prana through the body with this little device that the cosmonauts using there. And it totally mirrored using and working with the traditional Chinese medicine, acupuncture, and meridian system. Now, this is important because what it shows, if you follow the chart on the right with the meridian system, is that energy flowing from one point through this meridian pathway would actually pass through different organs of the body. And so as they did the measuring and the monitoring on a daily basis whilst in space, they could see that one organ or system of the body was either overstimulated and it needed to be sedated, or it was sedated and it needed to be stimulated to be brought back into balance. And this was an important breakthrough in science because they validated this energy system of the body that's thousands of years old, but now science had instrumentation to measure that field. Okay, next please. Another area of science that's emerging to understand subtle energy fields and how it relates to physicality is a new area of science known as somatics. And somatics is really being able to have a visual expression of sound. And when we see the patterns here that are replicated by nature, you'll see that on the top right-hand side, what was started out as what they call the Chladni symbols or images was Hans Jennings and several other physicists years ago started to realize that if you put a very fine powder onto a metal plate and then you had a frequency run through that metal plate, that powder would actually animate and start to move into different shapes. And so you can see that the hands there just pouring some of the powder. Once the plate has been stimulated by a certain frequency, it changed the order. Now, it's important in terms of subtle energy frequency and understanding frequency in waves across the board is that waves have an effect on matter. They either cause order or they cause and affect disorder. And you can see the images there where the golden images in the middle there, this is actually water that's vibrating, but it's actually just lit under a certain camera. And you can see when there's a certain frequency that's vibrating water, the water under the light at the right frequency can actually mimic certain structure and function within nature. And you can see there with the spiraling galaxy or the sunflower, you can see there again this spiraling effect, or the orange in the flower there as well. A German scientist, Alexander Ladewasser, published a book called Water Sound Images, and it's a revolutionary breakthrough as far as understanding frequency and also shape and geometry. And this might seem kind of obscure, but this is leading edge science in the quantum science realm as well, because what they're showing is that there's a subtle energy field that's not perceived by the ear, but it actually has an effect on causing shape. And you think of it this way: you go to a concert hall and you think of acoustics. The interior design of a concert hall has to be structured a particular way in order to have sound amplified and projected within the room. And it's the same thing in nature. We'll actually see that there are certain things that are in natural flow and natural order as well. So replicating these frequencies is really important. When we talk about the solfeggio scale frequency on the first page, what we're talking about is an ancient scale of music. And if you look at the left-hand image there with 432, that's a solfeggio scale frequency A. But if we're to look at the current frequency of 440 or 440 hertz, that is currently the way that our musical scale is today. And it was shifted years ago to try to uniform a scale of music, but it was actually done away from a scale that produces order. And it wasn't until we could actually see through water sound images and other devices where you can see that there's a lot more order and content or coherence within the solfeggio frequency than what there is where you can hear, if you think of the circle as being the music that you hear, but you've got this blurry murkiness that's on the center, so you're not really getting this other layers of information and vibrational harmony to the body as well. That 5 to 8 hertz that we talked about at the beginning, the frequency of love, is actually, when you put that through the tonoscope, it'll actually produce a frequency pattern that mimics the pineal gland. And also you can see the pine cone there as well. So what we've got is there are certain frequencies that mimic nature, and nature is ultimately has sound and resonance that underpins that. And that's what quantum physics is lighting up at the moment, that there is a resonant field that causes and creates an order in matter, and matter then reflects that order. And we can work with it, in harmony with it, or we can be at effect of it as well. So some of the scientific validation is showing up with a range of different technologies. If we were to look at the bioenergetic side of our body, we could be using technologies like ANSA. There's heart wave variability studies, but there's also Prognos. On the right-hand side, you can see the clinician working with a patient with the probe. And what that does, and you'll see the bottom right as well with the probe, is it'll produce an energetic status report of the individual. Now, it's an early diagnostic in some clinical settings, particularly in Europe, but it's an observational data and support data within the USA and many other countries. There are thousands of hospitals and clinicians around the world that use this as a diagnostic tool, but within the US it's known as observational data that may support other forms of data input as well. When we're talking about biophotonic, this is about the photon or light field emission or energy field emission that could be measured in and around the body. And if you see the bottom left, there's a software that will produce this field as a visual display. And the left-hand figure, you'll see, has got some missing energy patterns there. That's incoherence, which will mean to somebody looking at that is that there are areas of the body that aren't performing well. And so this could be a way of being able to see the energy state of the body. The image on the right-hand side you can see is fuller and more vibrant as well. There's several books that have been written, Konstantin Merle, DNA and Cell Resonance, and there's certainly many other books that will substantiate and validate what we're talking about in terms of the physics behind resonance in the cell. If you want to understand more about this arena, there's a fabulous documentary I would recommend you take a look at, and it's called Resonance, Beings of Frequency. Now, in 2012, it won the documentary award, and so it's something that's designed for the layperson to have a look at. Much of it you'll relate to if you think just musically, in terms of how certain music will impact the body. You feel relaxed and calm, in fact, maybe even a little sleepy or meditative, that kind of an effect. Or you've got another frequency of music which, gets you get you up off on your feet and doing your wild thing. So this is all part of understanding that we are frequency beings first and foremost, and this is reflected in how we experience our health and well-being. And then what we do is we look at some of the research where, in fact, Fritz Albert Pock suggests that he believes cells communicate with flashes of light, a bit like an internal internet, or what I refer to being as the internet, and that we need to understand and harness a greater understanding of this energetic field as well as the biochemical and physical relationship as well. So some fabulous research taking place. Next, please. Some of the early scientific findings on the biochemical and biological effects of electromagnetic field radiation spans a range of different things, but what we're talking about is a situation that can affect the subtle energy field. Now, subtle energy field is you don't walk around feeling the gravitational energy field. It's just something you exist within. You don't necessarily walk around and feel somebody's text message, whizzing past you, or a YouTube download. But this energy realm is really e-smog, and it's having a profound effect on life, but it's not necessarily widely understood. And so this is where some of the new research is unlocking. Bottom right, if you take a look at how the mobile phone radiation penetrates the brain, you can see the image on the left is of a 5-year-old, and because the skull is so much thinner, the radiation penetrates the brain far easier than you'll see a 10-year-old and then ultimately an adult, because the skull is a little thicker as well. And that's no disrespect to anyone, but that's just biology. Now, this was actually some research that was conducted by electrical engineers and understanding, the impact of certain frequencies on physiology. Crazy, not well known, but you'll start to know that on all cell phones today, there are warnings there about do not put your phone next to your ear. Kind of difficult to have a conversation. But you'll find also the profound research that came through from the University of Virginia just recently, and I'm talking June of 2015, where they discovered that the lymphatic system was thought to be in every biology book on the planet, only contained within the body from the neck down. And the lymphatic system, as many of you will know, is profoundly connected with your immune function and also the body's ability to eliminate toxicity and toxins in the body. What they found was, using some breakthrough research, was that the lymphatic system, in fact, goes all the way up and right through all the ganglia of the brain. And so all of this kind of network of threads of the lymphatic system goes through the brain. So you can imagine if you've got these areas that are removing toxins that are within the brain, what they're suggesting is that they now have a whole new understanding of many neurological disorders like Alzheimer's and dementia and what's going on there. So this is a huge breakthrough, and in effect they're saying that they'll need to rewrite the textbooks because it has such a very profound implication for health and also for our understanding of brain function. From our discussion this evening, it's about frequency and also the use of cell phones. You can imagine frequency affecting the lymphatic system, particularly in the brain, could present a whole range of challenges. Some of the tests that have been done on the QCHIP using what they refer to as an NLS 3D image device. It's a technology. This particular scan was done with before somebody holding their cell phone, and then somebody holding the cell phone with the QCHIP on. And when they did the recording of it, they hadn't done a reset on the date, so you'll actually see a date there, kind of crazy, 2007, but it was actually in fact done in November of this year. What it showed is if you see those little arrows with the energy status, with the down, and then you've got the pointing up, it's just referring to a different state or a different energy level of activity within the brain. So the above one is with the cell phone in its natural state being used, and the bottom image is the cell phone with a Q-chip attached to it. What the technology provided was that the Q-chip has a compensatory strengthening effect of 50% on the system of the body. So and this particular system being measured was the brain. So pretty important to say the least. Next. So what we have is also some other interesting observations. If you think of a CD or a DVD, if you were to look at a CD or a DVD, they look exactly the same. It's a big shiny disc, right? It's not until you put it in to a CD player would you know what's on there, whether it be music or a movie or otherwise. And so what you've really got is a bundle of frequencies, sound and light, that are actually burnt onto the disc. Well, think of it in general terms as that's what we've done with our proprietary QCHIP. We have infused our QCHIP with a range of proprietary frequencies that work in harmony with nature. And if you're to look at just the bottom left-hand image with the red and the black waves, what we're showing you is if you were to consider an original wave being in the black wave, the rise and the fall, the crest and the trough of a wave pattern, and then when you've got what they call a phase shift or another frequency that's slightly out of phase, so it's not rising and falling at the same time. In fact, it's falling and then rising in complete opposition to the wave that's being produced. What you have is a net effect of silence. And that's when you've experienced noise-canceling headphones and earphones, or if you think of soundproofing a room, what they're trying to do is offset certain wave patterns and muffle that, dampen that, or otherwise. And so that's really what's happening with the Q-chip. If you're to look at the blood test there, you'll actually see before and after bloods where when the blood is not coagulated and clumping, what that means typically is that there's a lot of acid in the pH is affected in the blood, and it doesn't transport oxygen particularly well. Whereas when you've got the nice, bulbous, full cells, you'll actually find that they not only transfer oxygen and nutrients through the veins nice and easily, it also helps the body eliminate toxins much more easily as well. Bottom right, you'll see that the chip before use, this is a thermal imaging. It's imaging that will measure a heat differentiation or variation on a human, and you'll see that there's the standing or what they call a base level image, and then you've got the middle one is when they're using a cell phone, and then the right image is when they're using a cell phone with the Q-chip attached. So there's a way of being able to dampen and to help neutralize or mitigate some of the frequencies that are being emitted from the cell phone. An interesting other little experiment or observation is the top right-hand side where this was just recently posted on Facebook, so if you haven't had a look, I suggest you go and have a look at the full article. It's fabulous, out of Sweden. And these are sprouts, and there were sprouts that were put by a router, and the same bag of sprouts were sprinkled into another little dish and put in another room away from the router. Now, the ones that were away from the router are the ones that grew, and the ones that were by the router are the ones on the bottom there. They didn't germinate. So this is just sort of an experiment that was done, and it's actually initiated a whole range of other research that's happening just recently as well. So interesting observation. Another image on the left-hand side there is a peach. Now you can have a peach with the chip on and with the chip off. And so you can actually see, and you think, oh, I've got a chip and it looks the same as another one, and what's different? Well, put it on a piece of fruit and let the fruit tell you what's doing, because you might put it on your phone and you say, I don't feel any different. Well, you're not necessarily supposed to feel any different because it's on your phone, because you may not be able to perceive subtle energy fields. But this is just sort of some ways to be able to measure and monitor something that's happening at a very, very subtle level, but the impact is significant. And so this is fruit from the same tree where you had a couple of different chips on, and then you had one off, and over a period of 5 days, 7 days, 14 days, you could actually see the fruit rotting and deteriorating as it normally would, or it would stay vibrant because there's coherence and order within the energy field still of the fruit itself. And the fruit didn't understand the science, didn't read a brochure, and never watch Google or YouTube to understand anything. It just shows you a way of being able to observe some interesting possibilities. And so we really just say that the QCHIP supports and fortifies the biofield through its proprietary bundle of subtle frequencies, and these resonate with and amplify the body's own healthy energy states. So, Art, that's me. Back to you.
Well, Chris, before you go here, and we have a chance to listen to some testimonials tonight, just want to ask you about this, this whole aspect that we've gone down the road with QCHIP, in that we're with the Calibrate product, we're looking at this internal epigenetic gene expression effect of positively affecting the body from the inside, and now we have this amazing QCHIP, which I kind of see it as a little mini CD-ROM, right? It contains this information on it that is affecting us. It's still epigenetic, except it's from an external standpoint. I mean, you could just look at the peach there and see that it's almost anti-aging or something like that. I don't know if that's what we could call it, but how would you describe it in layman's terms, the epigenetic effect of the QCHIP?
That's probably a much, much bigger conversation than we have time for this evening. But the important thing about it is that life and physical matter exist at the energetic level first, and then it exists as a matter state next, and then you have the order or functional form called a body or some other substance. So when you think of it like solid ice cube, change the state to liquid being water, change the state to steam being an invisible state. So realistically, the body has this functionality and has this biochemistry that can be measured. But that we can affect biochemistry with biochemistry, but we can also affect functionality because of bioenergetics. And so this is where the newer areas of biophysics is overlapping epigenetics, and it's an exciting area of research, particularly with Professor Fritz Albert Popp at the Planck Institute and other research that's happening around the world. They're just showing that, the ancient societies knew that in the beginning we talk about the sound as being what was prevalent, and all ancient scriptures talk about it. All ancient teachings of have a recognition of sound and music and what it does and what it can do for the body. Now, all we're doing is we're going into another layer of that, so we're targeting certain functions that can help neutralize some of the man-made frequencies, so that way we're not being at the effect of it. So this is like an outside in, and the calibrator is the inside out.
That's great. One of the ways that I have tried to imagine it myself is that, dogs can hear frequencies that we can't hear. And
yes.
But those frequencies are still there. The sound is still going on. It's such a higher frequency that we can't hear it, but a dog can. And that there's frequencies embedded on this QCHIP, this little mini CD-ROM, for lack of a better word, that I've come up with, that has information on it that is kind of, in a sense, transmitting itself to us in very minute, subtle ways that allow our bodies to relax, just like when we're listening to music. And it changes. It truly is an epigenetic effect from the standpoint of it. It causes us to relax. It causes us to feel grounded. It causes us to feel more at ease and clear and balanced. And I mean, there's a whole bunch of words that you could use for it, but that it really is something on that chip that is interacting with this bioenergetic field that we all have. And I don't like to call it an invisible raincoat. I guess you could, kind of, in a way. It actually makes your body turn into like an invisible raincoat, I guess you could say, for lack of a better analogy for now. Would that be kind of, in a way, a subtle way of explaining it?
Look, I think rather than an invisible raincoat, because we start to go into kind of crazy words and possibilities, think of it this way. You know, there's a lot of invisible noise and chaos that's going on in the frequency spectrum, right? And just think of it as being in a very, very busy room and there's conversations going out. But if I called out, Art, you're there. Art hears his voice and he follows my calling and he can find me. This is like giving the individual a reference point back to a harmony field and a harmony frequency. It's calling them, it's this tuning fork, this way of being able to remind you where that point of balance is again. And that's kind of what we're doing, is we're cutting through the noise and we're giving a simple way or a bearing back to the body to stay in a place of harmony rather than being at effect of man-made frequencies and the static and chaos.
All right. Well, Chris, thank you so much for being with us tonight. I know you have some places to be, and it's a completely different time over there than it is here. So thank you for being with us tonight.
Look, I hope you've enjoyed it, Art, and it's always a pleasure to join everybody on the call. Have a great one, and
thank you.
Greeting to everybody if we don't speak again. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you. All right, folks. Well, I've asked a couple of people, or they volunteered, thankfully, to come on the webinar tonight and share with us their experience with the QCHIP. And let me see here. I'm finding the right. There it is. I think I got the right one here. Diana, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Oh, I got the right one. Yay. Thank you for being with us tonight. Why don't you share with us, and of course that's Robin, our founder of the company, with you there on that picture there on the November the 7th. Why don't you share with us a little bit about your experience with QCHIP so far?
First, absolutely fabulous information. Thank you so much, Chris and Art, for hosting it. The one thing I all of a sudden noticed was that I'm sleeping better at night. I've always had really vivid dreams where they wake me up kind of in a panic because they're usually not such nice dreams. I don't know how else to say it. And they're just so vivid, and it wakes me up constantly throughout the night, where I'll wake up and start tossing and turning and just can't turn my brain off. And since the QCHIP, I don't know what else it could be. I sleep about a solid 7 hours a night now, which feels amazing. So that's the only thing different that we've done is we all have the QCHIP on all our devices, and I'm turning things off now too. I used to always leave our computer on 24/7 and iPads and everything. So now everything gets turned off at night, and we have the QCHIPs on all our devices. So sleeping that solid 7 hours makes me feel really good the next day.
Well, thanks for sharing with us tonight. All right. Let's see. We've got somebody who hasn't been on one of our webinars before, and I hope she's there. I'm going to try to get you unmuted here, Sarah, all the way up in Minnesota. I think I got your number right here. Let's see if you're here.
Can you hear me?
There? We can hear you. All right. Yay. Hi, Sarah.
I can't even say the frozen tundra because, we don't even have snow yet, if you can believe that.
Right. Well, listen, before you give your testimonial on the QCHIP, I just want to, first of all, thank you for coming to California for our event all the way from Minnesota. And why don't you just share with people a little bit, not too long, but just a nutshell about, why you're with Clarity and what you thought of the event, and then tell us about your experience with QCHIP.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me on. It was awesome. I did, since we are sticking with the number 8 theme, I'll go through them really quickly, but I started thinking about why Clarity. And first and foremost, I've known you for years. I know you've talked about being the grandfather of network marketing. I hope I didn't dream that and make you feel old. but I know you spend hours and hours researching. So for me, that just gave me, I knew it would be worth trying just because of my relationship with you and knowing you did all the research. You introduced me to Robin right away, and talked about a lady with heart and her vision. She's healthy, she's successful. You look at someone like that, she didn't need to do this, but she wants to help people, and that was very evident. Number 3, she put together an awesome leadership team. Chris was on the call. How awesome is that? And how great it is to have these webinars that we don't have to explain all that. We have experts to do that. Michelle Anton, just a live wire, what she brings with all her experience in TV and radio producing. She's just a great person to have on the team. But we wouldn't all be here if it wasn't for the products. Nutrition has, it's a growing industry, but like so many people say, if you don't have your health, you don't have anything. And that's so true. And it's a product that is safe for kids, the elderly, anyone in between, and pregnant women. I did get that question answered, not for me, but that's kind of unheard of, because almost anything when you're pregnant, check with your doctor, but Calibrate is safe, so that was neat. Cutting edge products, QCHIP, Chris just covered that. I can give my testimonial on that while I'm here, or while I'm at this point, because I have 4 kids, and you just read, everybody's on their cell phone, and, they say it may cause cancer. Why wait? Is it going to make a difference? Just that peace of mind is awesome. I mean, you just want to get that in the hands of the people you love, for sure. Number 6, compensation plan. FTC, we're all familiar with. They're not all familiar, but their rules. And just knowing that it's compliant and you did the plan based on customer acquisition, that's awesome. I love the grandma factor. Anybody can make money with this plan as long as they're working it. 7 professional website brochures, gift cards. That was brilliant. And last but not least, the vision. Where are we going? Started with a wonderful product. We've got inside, outside protection right now. We're not a company that is a cure-all for everything with millions of products, but you're selective on what we want to put out there, and you're doing a lot of research, and it's all cutting edge. So those are my clear 8.
All right. Thank you so much, Sarah, for sharing with us tonight. And we'll look forward to having you on the future webinars. And thank you again for your sharing with us tonight. All right, folks, a couple of more things I'll just share with you. There's a picture of me at the event. And I tell you what, as I had shared with so many of you that were there, that I would have never been able to make it to the event if we'd had the event in June or July. The product's been a miracle for me, the Calibrate product, but I've believed in this type of technology that we have in the QCHIP for over 20 years. I've always had something on my cell phone or something on my computers, some kind of devices of some kind that supposedly helps with electromagnetic, force or frequencies, EMR, radiation, and so on and so forth. Well, I'm one of those kind of people that's hypersensitive to electronic signals and fluorescent lights and just about anything. I mean, I'm just one of those super sensitive people. And some of you are out there, you know what I'm talking about. I mean, how many times have you walked across the carpet and, gotten static, on your arms and your hair raises and stuff like that? These are all very subtle frequencies and things that happen to us, static electricity. We can't see it, but we can certainly feel it. Stick your finger in a wet finger in a jack and get shocked. You're going to feel it, but you can't see it. Well, that's what's going on with all the wireless smog and all the wireless frequencies. I mean, satellites, cell phones, wireless routers. I mean, right here in our own home, we just moved and we've got a wireless cell tower. The alarm system is wireless and cellular. The device that goes to the U-verse other mobile TV that's in the house is wireless. Then there's an M-cell tower in the house. And then there's the computers. I've got 3 screens, 2 laptops, and an iMac. Look at all the devices that are just around me all day long. And that's been my life, for the last 20 years because I'm an IT kind of guy and love computers and love technology. So one thing that I have found, even with the new phones that have come out recently, but especially with the older phones, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years ago, I don't know if any of you can remember getting one of those old Motorola cell phones, and if you used it for more than 5 minutes, you couldn't even hold it anymore. It gets so hot, right? And you could not even hold it to your head. You had to use the speakerphone because within 2 minutes your head got so hot you thought you were going to die. I mean, literally. And that's for real back in the day, right? Well, of course, technology is improving, and the devices are better at receiving frequencies and sending out frequencies. And they don't have to be such high amplitude devices and all that. But even so, even the latest cell phones, I'm so sensitive to these things that if I hold a regular cell phone in my hand and I use it without the QCHIP, okay, and I'm actually online and I'm doing something with it, I'm either on a phone call or I'm actually using it on the web, I'm surfing the web or something like that, checking messages, texting back and forth and things like that. Of course, I hold it in my left hand all the time. My hand will get numb and my hand will start tingling. And with the QCHIP, since I put the QCHIP on there, my hand has not tingled once. It has not gotten numb or even slightly that way. I'll go on a 2-mile walk every day now, and I carry the cell phone in my right hand or my left hand. I get no numbness, no any issues like that at all. And for years, but especially in the last few months, using the cell phone, I've never been able to hold the cell phone up to my head for more than 3 or 4 minutes without my face tingling, without my head starting to get hot, without myself starting to feel fatigued. Without any kind of device on it. Put the QCHIP on there, and since I put that QCHIP on that cell phone, I can have a lengthy conversation with somebody and barely even perceive any kind of feeling of any kind of inflammation or anything like that. No tingling sensation, maybe a little tiny bit of heat after a little while from it, but that's it. And I just feel it's not just a feeling of peace of mind. It's an actual feeling of confidence that there's something going on here, whether it's subtle or whether it's, super right in your face. It really does work. And I definitely feel more grounded, fortified, centered, balanced, and definitely less stressed using the QCHIP. Well, folks, it's been a 56-minute webinar. We didn't intend for it to go this long, but we thank you for spending the time with us tonight on this. Thank you so much, and have a great weekend, and we look forward to seeing you Saturday on Saturday's training webinar. Have a great night.